Welcome to the herd and thanks for listening. If you enjoy this Sodcast, please like it, share it, give it a good rating, and follow, and help more people find their way into the Ruminati herd. If you have suggestions for improvements, please let me know. Howdy, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Meet Your Herdmates Sodcast. And I have the pleasure today to be joined by Kit Pharo. And he's coming from balmy eastern Colorado, about as far east as you can go in Colorado, as I recall.
That's correct.
Last exit on the interstate, is that right?
We're 28 miles south of the last exit on the interstate in Colorado.
Where the wind rarely stops blowing.
That's right.
And one of the interesting things in today's episode is I call this the Meet Your Herdmates Sodcast. And the first time I heard Kit, he was giving a herd quitter seminar. I think that was in northeastern Nebraska in 2011. So that goes back a little ways.
10 years.
Mm-hmm. So
you haven't aged a bit.
Oh, thank you, you sweet talker. What do you mean by herd quitter?
I think the herd quitter has several different ways to look at it. The way I've looked at it is we started our business in 1985. We came back to the ranch and I looked around, and my first goal was to show everybody else how smart I was. And well, that lasted about 6 months. And so then I started looking at what everybody was doing, because I thought, I just as well learn from everybody else. And before I knew it, I thought, these guys, that's all they're doing. They're just doing what everybody else is doing. And it doesn't make sense to me. I had a few people that were big in my life as far as helping me to see the truth when I needed to see the truth. So, back in that time, while everybody else was running as hard as they could this way, they said, stop and let's think about this. Maybe we don't want to just jump in with the herd and start running. What if the whole herd falls over the cliff? You go with it. So we stopped and we said, we're going to take a different approach. At that time in my part of agriculture, the goal was to produce as many pounds per animal as we could. And that kind of makes sense. But really and truly, ranchers are in the solar business. We take solar energy, we produce grass, and the grass feeds our cattle. And so we have acres and acres of solar collectors out there, which are the plants. And I thought, and the friends I was with said, we don't want to produce more pounds per cow. We want to produce more pounds per acre, because this is a solar collector. If we can make that solar collector better and more efficient, if we can utilize what it produces, now we're increasing pounds per acre. And the more we thought about that, we thought, this is so obvious and so much more profitable than increasing pounds per cow. And so that's where we pretty much broke the herd, went away from the herd, and have been that way for the last 35 years. About 35 years. And I came up with the herd quitter concept in 2008. And what I was thinking then is, this is what we are. This is what I am. Our organization grew from almost nothing back in 1985 until we were a major business in the livestock industry by the year 2000. And I said, we did everything we did by going away from what everybody else was doing. So I said to myself, I'm a herd quitter. And our organization includes a lot of other people, a lot of other families. And I shared that concept with my people. I said, we're herd quitters. And every one of them, I don't think any of them thought that was a good idea at that time. And the reason is, as ranchers, as cattlemen, every now and then we gather up the cow herd and we take them in to process them or to take the babies off their mothers or to vaccinate the calves or whatever. And as we're gathering up the cows, there's always one cow that's out here on the outside edges with her calf. She knows something's up. She doesn't want to be a part of this herd. And she takes off running as hard as she can, and her calf's keeping right up with her. So we got to go out and bring her back. And we just keep doing that. That's a herd quitter cow. And she's very frustrating because it takes you twice as long to do anything because you're always chasing that cow. Mm-hmm. But I thought about it, and out of those, let's say there's 200 head of cows out there, the only cow that's thinking for herself is that herd quitter. The rest of them are just following the herd. They don't know what's ahead of them. They don't care. But that, the more I thought about it, I said, I'm proud to be a herd quitter. And everybody else in our organization is that way too. And as I look back, what history I do know, throughout history, those who broke away, who were contrarians, herd quitters, who did something different, they made history. Nobody ever made history by doing what everybody else is doing. The best way to manage any business in the world is not by doing what everybody else is doing. It's by seeing something that nobody else is doing and going that way or doing that. So, to me, it's a huge factor. And I don't care what business you're in. If you're in a business, you can't be doing everything the same as everybody else, or you're just average. Mm-hmm. The only way to get ahead is to be different.
Yeah. And now you said you and Deanna went back to the ranch. So where had you been? Did you grow up there initially and leave and come back, or what?
Okay. I'll back up even farther than that. My dad was born and raised in Denver. He was a city kid. Always wanted to be a cowboy. My mom was born and raised in this area where we're at now, eastern Colorado. They met in college. And during the drought and dust storms of the 1950s, they moved out here and rented a small place. And the reason I bring that up is because Dad, because he was a city kid, he was not the second, third, fourth generation rancher. He did not see things the same as everybody else. He always asked questions that nobody else asked. Why do we do it this way? And that just shocks everybody else. They don't want to be confronted with a question that they can't really tell you. We just keep cutting off this much of the roast so it fits in because grandma had to do that to fit in the roaster bin, so to speak. It becomes a tradition that makes no sense. But anyway, I grew up here. My dad had an off-farm job, small cow herd, and after I graduated from college, I spent a lot of my time rodeoing. I mean, I was a professional rodeo cowboy, which there's a really poor living there. But I did that. I worked at a feedlot. We got a job in town. I opened a solar business back in 1980 in a retail store, and that gave me kind of a business mindset. But we did not come back to this type of lifestyle until 1985 after being away from it for 15 years. And so we're in the same general area that I grew up, close, but not the exact same place. And I guess, hope that answered that question.
Absolutely. So I'll give you the chance to talk about what some people see as the oxymoron of ranching. That you said in one presentation that you were talking to someone and you were going to talk about ranching profitably, and their response was, "Isn't that an oxymoron?"
I think that happened when I was going through customs. Used to have a lot of speaking engagements, but I was going through customs in Canada, and they said, "What are you up here for?" I said, "I have a speaking engagement." They said, "What about?" I said, "Profitable ranching." They said, "Isn't that an oxymoron?" And that's been a joke for a long time. Truth be known, ranching is a break-even business. We make money 5 years out of 10. We lose money 5 years out of 10. We're basically breaking even. we're smart enough to know that when we make pretty good money, we don't spend it all on new pickups. We put some in the bank for those bad years. But nobody's making a decent living in this business. No, I'll take that back. Most people are not making a decent living in this business. There are some that are making a really, really, really good living in this business and are building up wealth. And they're the herd quitters. I mean, as long as you're doing what all your neighbors are doing, you're breaking even.
As you said, the average is not something you want to aspire to.
No.
You've mentioned industry, you mentioned business already. So there's a tie there that a lot of, it's my perception, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's my perception that a lot of people within the beef cattle business, and I'll come back to that because there's many businesses within the beef industry and they look very different and they're spread around. But certainly at the cow calf level of the industry, it seems to me like a lot of that is lifestyle, not necessarily business. What would your reaction to that observation be?
I think that has to be the truth. Why else would we stick around and break even? How many business can you think of? Think about the motel in town or the restaurant in town or whatever business, the tire dealership or the car dealership. How long are those businesses going to be in business if they're breaking even?
Or not making money, yeah.
Not making any money, just breaking even, a little bit here and a little bit less there. But ranching, we've been doing this for decades, for generations. I think 50 years ago, ranching was more profitable than it is today. A lot more profitable, to be honest. But for the last 50 years, we've basically been breaking even and still doing it because of the lifestyle. And we all love the lifestyle. Neighbors or, outsiders will look in and say, they envy what we're doing. They envy what we get up and go do every day. You talk to most ranchers about that, and they wonder why. But there again, it can be a great business. You just can't do everything like your neighbors.
Mm. And they envy it until it's 20 below, and you've got to go make sure
Right.
the waters are working. And
earlier this week would have been not so enviable.
Difference between reality and romance. But okay, so why would ranching be less profitable today than it was in, say, the 1980s?
Well, I'm going to back up another decade because I have more accurate figures to work with that. So I'm going to go back to 1970, which is basically 50 years ago. 50 years ago, we could rent or buy land for 1/10 what it costs today. Now, granted, the inflation figured in there, has to be figured in there, but we thought land was expensive 50 years ago. It's really expensive now. We have to compete with recreation buyers and all sorts of other things now. Land's very valuable. It's more valuable than what most ranchers can pay for with cows. 50 years ago, that was when I was rodeoing. I could buy a gallon of gasoline for 25 to 35 cents a gallon. Can't do that anymore. 50 years ago, I could buy a brand new pickup for less than $5,000. You can't buy a new pickup for less than $50,000 today. Tractors and balers and everything involved with ranching has got more and more and more expensive. And the profits or the prices we're receiving for our cattle have not gone up that much. I've heard that the cost of inputs, which would be fossil fuel inputs, implements, labor. In fact, 50 years ago when I was working, I was making $2.50 an hour. Nobody would work for $2.50 an hour, and I wasn't being underpaid. I thought I was being paid fair. So all of this has changed in 50 years, and yet, here's my thinking. most ranchers, I'd say 90% of cow-calf producers, ranchers on the land are still operating just like their dad and their granddad did 50 years ago. Nothing's changed except for the herd quitters. The herd quitters say, okay, we're in a solar energy business. We're not in the farming business trying to, run tractors and stuff like that. So that's a difference and why it's more break even now than it was 50 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You've said that in order for something to be sustainable, it needs to be profitable, it needs to be enjoyable, and as well as any other sort of component that we want to look at. And if clearly it's a business, so if there's not return on investment, if there's not profit, then the business can't maintain. If it's not enjoyable, then there's all kinds of pressures that puts on people.
Right.
And all of that, I agree, or at least I resonate with the idea that we haven't given that enough attention when we talk about this life. We want to enjoy this lifestyle, but are we really enjoying this lifestyle, or
well, here's my thoughts on that. I mean, agriculture or any business has to be profitable and enjoyable. If you hate what you're doing, there's no reason doing it. If you're not making any money, there's no reason doing it. But a lot of agriculture has reached a point where we still enjoy the lifestyle. We're just not making much profit. We can get by. It's sad for me to look around. I guess I could qualify as a second generation rancher. But there's a lot of people that have their third, fourth, fifth generation ranches, and those ranches have been paid for decades. And in the last 10 years, they're borrowing against that land to stay in business. Mm-hmm. That's not a profitable business. They should never have to borrow any money to stay in business, but they are. I'm going to take a little different approach. The average rancher, cow-calf producer, is over 60 years of age. And my question is, if this is such a great business, why isn't the next generation coming back to it? Because they're not, obviously. Mm-hmm. We just keep getting older and older, and a few kids slip back in. But the reason is, most of these kids have watched their parents work relentlessly, often with off-farm jobs in town, just to break even. Mm-hmm. Now, the lifestyle is great, but they're working way too hard to break even. They say, I don't have to do that. Mm-hmm. And a lot of those parents that, where they have a 40-hour-a-week job in town, now they work 40 hours on the weekend to get caught up out on the farm or ranch. Well, how fun is that? The kids are saying, that was a great place to grow up, but I'm going to go do something else.
Mm-hmm. I've wondered about those statistics at times because of the way agricultural businesses have to be structured for tax and other estate purposes. So how, you may have someone who is the owner advancing in age with somebody else coming in, but not in the ownership. So that might skew. But clearly, when we go to meetings, we see the audience that's attending, and even that can be a little misleading. You, in one presentation I watched, talk about how third generation. So maybe grandpa's still there, dad's still there. They send Junior to see your program, and Junior gets all excited, or a program that you're a part of. So he sees lots of presentations, gets lots of ideas, and goes back. So you said something about how quickly innovation occurs in every business but ranching.
Yeah, and I'm not sure this is 100% true, but
it's a good story. Go with it. Yeah.
In most industries, innovation is accepted and put to work within 17 to 24 months. That means if I'm making computers and the guy down the road is making computers and he figures out a way to make them twice as good for half the price, if I don't adapt what he's found, I'm going to go out of business. He's going to put me out of business. However, in agriculture, and let's say specifically cow-calf production, it takes 17 to 24 years for innovation to be accepted and put to use. And I think if anything, an old friend of mine in North Dakota gave that to me years ago, and he called me up the other day just to touch base. I said, "Do you still agree with 17 to 24 years?" He says it's over 30 years. And when you think about it, it's a generation.
Yeah, and it might actually be worse, because I can't recall where, and I'm going to have to go dig it up and send you so that you have it. But there was someone who was talking about businesses and innovation, and if he couldn't turn this idea from inception to implementation within, and it was less than a year, and I'm thinking nothing in agriculture can sit in that time frame if you're talking about perennial grass, or you can't. So by necessity, it can't be that rapid. But then you've got this herd societal thing that and so to complete your story, then Junior goes home and tells his parents and grandparents about this, and then what happens?
Well, back up a little bit. It's not the young generation that is the problem. People say, well, they're just too lazy. Well, they're too smart to work as hard as you've been working. They're not too lazy. But, given the opportunity, grandpa and dad will say, maybe you ought to go see this meeting on, whatever it is, different kind of agriculture. And so they send Junior over there, and he gets a little excited. He says, this is different than what I've always been told. It can be profitable. It can be, we can do things that I never knew we could do. So he goes home and he tells his dad and his grandpa all these great ideas, and they just basically says, we can't do that. You can't do that here. And who told you that? But, the sad part of it is it really does take that long. I go to meetings and I talk about, let's say, rotational grazing, where we're getting more use of solar energy, less use of fossil fuel energy. If we know how to manage our grass correctly, we can produce twice as much grass, which supports twice as much cows, which makes twice as much money. And everybody in most audiences that I talk to, they've heard of this. They heard about this back in the late 1980s, which is that's 40 years now.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's 30 plus years. Yeah. I said, okay, how many of you are practicing what I'm talking about? The hands will go up. And then I say, because that's a type of, we're in a group of herd quitters at this meeting. I say, how many of you had to have neighbors, or what percent of your neighbors are doing what you're doing? It's almost always zero. So those neighbors have been exposed to the same thing for 30 years, and they don't get it. It's too different. We're not going to accept it. When you really narrow it down to the final sad point is that we advance one funeral at a time. There's not going to be any advancing in most families until one generation passes and the next generation can take over. Unfortunately, a lot of these families don't have a next generation. I mean, whether we like to think about it or not, we're running out of the next generation, which allows the profitable ranchers to get bigger and bigger. Yeah, I'm okay with that. That's business.
Well, and the other closely related to that is, unfortunately, some operations wait too long to try to make change, if they ever do. And they could have been successful had they seen the signs that were present a couple decades earlier, and now they're so deep in that it may, it's the unrecoverable stall at that point that, um, and so hopefully more people hear and can see, but there is all this human nature, and everybody farms on a billboard, so everybody sees what you're doing, and there seems to be a real desire to, I told you he was wrong, and look at that, and well,
Yeah.
he just learned something, and you've been doing the same thing for 20 years. What have you learned?
Right.
But
Everybody wants to fit in, and yet it's that guy that's on the outside doing something different. He may fail once in a while, but he's always going to excel past everybody else.
Mhm. So you are in, would you describe yourself as a seed stock, or how would you describe your operation?
That would be accurate. I would say we're in the ranching business, cow-calf business, but we are basically in the genetic business. And that's what a seed stock producer is. He produces seed to help other ranchers. So seed stock, genetics. Uh, we started back in as I said, back in the late 80s, and realized, here's several things that we can do different than our neighbors and make more money. And probably the third thing, making better use of the sun. The first one would be making better use of the sun through your grass production. Second one is calving in sync with nature, which, especially after you've been through a week of 20 below temperatures and your neighbors are calving, that's inhumane. There's no other way to put it. That's inhumane to calve in the wintertime. God gave, every calf is born with a summer haircut. And it doesn't matter if he's born in February or June, he's got a summer haircut. So we're not designed, in the beginning, nothing was designed to calve out of sync with nature or God's creation. So that was number two. And the third thing is genetics. And I said, nobody's producing me a bull that will take me in the right direction. So I said, this is an opportunity that I need to look into. And we did. Mm-hmm. So, the business, the seed stock business is we produce the genetics that we can sell in the form of a bull to our neighbors, our other ranchers, and say, if you would like to have a program that's like our program, here's the genetics you need.
So yeah, you're producing bulls that fit your cow-calf operation philosophy. Is that a fair?
Right.
And so we again, too many people, I don't think, appreciate the fact that the animal that ends up on a rail, regardless of how it's finished, isn't the animal that the cow-calf producer sells. I mean, there's some more months and some more ownership typically. I mean, some retain ownership, but so you're getting paid on the calf that you sell, not the final sort of end of that process directly.
Right. The average rancher sells wean calves. When those calves are 6 to 8, 10 months of age, they take them off their mothers, and they either keep them for a little while, but they sell them to the next whatever phase. Part of it. The stalkers, feeder. They'll eventually end up being grass finished or feedlot finished, and eventually end up being slaughtered and sold for meat. My business is probably back a generation. So you got the seed stock producers, cow-calf producers, the stalkers, the feeders, and the processor. So I'm in the genetic business. I sell the genetics to the seed stock or the cow-calf producers who produce calves and sell calves. Mm-hmm. But that determines the cow-calf producer. If they want black calves, they use black bulls. If they want, short, thick calves, they use that kind of bull. That's the genetic part of it.
So let's talk about bragging rights in the cattle industry. It's my impression that the cattle industry has been driven a lot by fashion over the years, and some of that has not worked out so well. So if you could explain why it's not a good idea to focus on increasing weaning weights for the cow-calf producer?
Yeah, I could spend an hour on that, but that's where we started. This increasing pounds per animal, which is weaning weight, versus increasing pounds per acre, which is what we control down here. And it's been kind of a 50-year thing since this started. We learned how scientists have come up with the ways to measure and predict, breeding values for animals. We call them expected progeny differences. So that started about 50 years ago, and it's very accurate. We could select bulls that would increase our weaning weights and just keep doing that, and we've done it for 50 years, and that's what we produce. And so it becomes kind of a thing, when we go to the sale with our calves, those who have the heaviest calves have the bragging rights. Now, they may have lost money, and most of them are losing money, but that's the bragging rights.
Yeah.
Now, take the other approach, the guy that says, okay, I don't care about bragging rights, I'm going to increase my pounds per acre. Pounds per acre equals profit, not bragging rights. The calves individually won't be as big, but totally there's going to be more total weight, and it's usually worth more per pound.
So cost of production per acre as opposed to production per individual.
You're only half there. It's more of a stocking rate thing. If I'm trying to increase individual weaning weights, pounds per cow, I can't have very many cows.
Right.
And she's going to be big cows, and she's going to eat a lot.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd rather have is, 50% more cows, stocking rate, producing 50% more calves. Now they will be smaller, but overall we're going to get a whole bunch more total pounds.
So what's an animal?
It's a stocking rate.
What's an animal unit month?
I don't know.
Yeah, it's what, the feed for a 1,000-pound cow and her calf?
Usually they figure 1,000-pound cow, but the average cow in America is over 1,400 pounds now.
So right there's a significant difference between what some may be planning on and the reality on the ground.
Yeah, most people figure a cow eats 2.5% of her own weight every day in dry matter. So, it doesn't take a genius. Now, this isn't 100% linear and accurate, but, a 1,500-pound cow is going to eat quite a bit more than a 1,000-pound cow.
Yes.
And she's not going to produce that much more.
Right. So when, what is do you have a target weaning weight, or is that a meaningless sort of
No,
stat?
I think when you have a target weaning weight, you're chasing the wrong thing.
Okay.
I could say I want a target weaning weight of 500 pounds or 600 pounds. That's my focus, and now I lost track of what's making me money.
Okay.
And I really don't have a target pounds per acre either. It's just that that's where we need to be looking is, here, I wish I could show a picture, but you've probably seen my picture of the two trucks.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say this ranch over here can produce 50,000 pounds of calves. This ranch over here can produce 50,000 pounds of calves. Now, this ranch produces 50,000 pounds of calves that weigh 600 pounds. This ranch produces 50,000 pounds of calves that weigh 400 pounds. So there's a lot more calves in this truck, but the same total pounds. And that's about a truckload. A truckload is 50,000 pounds. So which truck? Here's 600-pound calves, 50,000 pounds. There's 50,000 pounds of 400-pound calves. Which one's worth more? Year in and year out, the truck with the smaller calves is worth $15,000 to $20,000 more than the truck with the big calves.
And
so chasing weaning weight per cow made us no money.
So the price that's paid for the smaller animal per pound is higher than the price paid for the larger animal.
Exactly.
Okay. So congratulations, I've got 200-pound heavier calves, or 100, I can do the math, 100-pound heavier calves. But you've gotten less money for them. You've
Total
also
money.
experienced cost because of the feed requirements for the mother. You've also experienced an opportunity cost because if they're bigger cows, there's fewer of them that you can run on a given amount of resource.
Right.
Wow.
And that's where we get the bragging rights. You know, we think if I can have bigger calves than my neighbor, obviously I'm more profitable. Very few people have actually sat down and said, well, that doesn't even make sense. Why are we doing it?
So
And that's why I said stocking rate affects profitability more than anything else. If I can run 50% more cows on the same acres, I'm going to make a whole lot more money.
and as long as that calf, that 500-pound animal, has the growth potential to produce what the customer ultimately wants in terms of carcass quality, size,
Right.
performance.
We still have to fit the end box. Now we may be at the smaller end of the end box. The end box is at the packing plant,
Okay.
where they box the meat out and send it to the stores. You know, we can't produce cows the size of dogs because nobody wants beef that size.
Oh.
But we can produce different sized cows and have a home for it. You know, there's been a lot of talk out there, you know, that with 1,500 pound cows and steers that are killing at 16 to 1,700 pounds, you know, what size steaks are we getting? We don't have farm boys that can eat that much meat anymore. You know,
we're working on it.
I mean, we can try to eat it, but there's
but the
no
market
sense.
doesn't. Yeah, the market will penalize it.
And that's, you know, part of the industry thinks they're making more money by doing that, but they aren't.
So, Mama makes you money twice at two occasions, right? When you sell her or when you sell her calf, is that right?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, she's gonna make me money every year, one way or the other. I mean, she's producing a calf, or if she didn't produce a calf, I'll just send her to town and take the money. But yeah, you know, we expect a cow to be a cow, and that's another tragedy is that we've got cows so big. The industry does. I don't. Industry has cows so big they don't fit any environment. You know, it's a great thing, but I never would have thought this until I started asking our customers. But I can sell our low growth bulls. These bulls are not been bred and developed for growth. I can sell that to customers that have been using high growth bulls, and we get bigger calves with low growth bulls. And the reason is because calves out of our bulls fit that environment. They're not struggling to make their maintenance requirements. You know, calf's not going to grow until he meets his maintenance requirements. And most of the cattle today have maintenance requirements too high. You know, it just takes too much feed for them to get there, and then growth comes slow after that. Whereas ours are, you know, they're low maintenance cattle. They meet their maintenance requirements, then they start growing. Yeah. But you know, that's been a huge benefit to our program. You know, if I can tell people, you use our smaller bulls, and you'll get the same size calf or bigger. He'll just look a little different. He won't be so tall and leggy. He's going to be thicker.
And of course, one of the penalties to having maternal cattle that don't fit the environment is they're going to be less fertile in that environment without supplemental feed and the expense.
Yeah, and fertility for a rancher is number one. You know, you want that cow to get bred every year and to raise you a calf every year. That's important. It's just become, as you mentioned, you know, we have to feed those big cows extra to get them bred, to have a calf, and that's just taken away from the profits again. We've got ourselves in a cycle that we can't stop as an industry until we basically say, hold on, I'm going to back up. I'm going to take a different approach, and that's where I say that the most profitable ranchers I know of, they're herd quitters, and they're
So,
very profitable. They're able to buy land that nobody else thinks is affordable.
hmm. So you, um, I've heard different statistics, and you may have something, but something on the order of 3/4 of the average cost of a cow-calf operation is feed costs.
Yeah, I think it's kind of always been this way for a long time. 70%, I think it's 70% of my cost of production to produce a calf is for feed to feed that cow, basically. And let me look at this. 70% of my expenses is for feed, and then I'll look at it a different way. Only 30% of what I pay for feed actually goes into production. 70% is just to maintain the cow.
Hmm.
And I believe on a bigger cow, it just takes more and more and more. So we've got to meet the maintenance requirements, the survival requirements, and then we can start growing a calf or getting bred.
So I think I remember in one of your presentations you talking about milking traits are another thing that can be selected for through these expected progeny differences. And people have assumed that increasing that would increase weaning weight and therefore profit. And yet, again, there's a
It's
lot.
opposite.
Okay.
You know, I'm going to talk about maintenance requirements again and again and again, I guess. But it takes so much energy to maintain you where you are, maintain me where I am, maintain a cow, and you can't get any bigger or any fatter until you meet those requirements. You can't, if you're a cow, you can't produce milk for your calf till you make your own survival requirements. You can't get bred until you make your own survival and enough to feed that calf. It's all about maintenance requirements. The three things that affect maintenance requirements are frame, that's height, and growth, and milk. So, there's three things that everybody's been shooting for. We want cattle bigger, we want cattle to grow faster, we want higher milk cows so we can make bigger calves. All we've done is created an animal that's hard to stay in production. And that was, we could see that happening 35 years ago. We took a different approach, and I think it's obvious that we're correct, but that's just my thinking.
Well, clearly, I agree with you, and clearly that's because I'm perceptive and I recognize intelligence when I see it, and I agree with it. So, no, but you've been doing this long enough to have data. And,
Yeah.
one of the lines is, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." I don't think we in this branch of agriculture have used the data that's been available without having a lot of filters in between our eyes and the page. And I think that that's hurt us over time.
Either that or we use the wrong data, wrong information. But that all depends on your goal. If you want to increase pounds per cow, then we've got the information that'll get you there.
Yeah, yeah. I
If you want to
remember,
increase profit, we've got the information that'll get you there, but they're two different things.
I remember hearing one producer from Illinois, I think it was, saying, "I'm going to produce 300 bushel corn and I don't care what it costs."
Yeah.
Okay. we're,
Yeah.
we're back to bragging rights and buckles, and if you want to wear buckles,
And he can do exactly what he says he's going to
yes,
do.
absolutely, absolutely. And I remember another conversation where I was told that cost of production is a meaningless statistic. And I looked at him and said, "Could you repeat that, please? And can you think of any industry anywhere where that would be not just laughed out of the room?" I mean, how?
So what did
Okay.
he say?
He gave me some answer about how, because of this, that, and the other thing, it's too variable, and what it's like. No, sorry.
We like to blame outside factors for the problems we created ourselves.
Yeah, true. I'm looking over some of my notes that I made. Um, I I think that your children are too smart to be doing what you've been doing, or the way you've been doing it. Oh, that's it. One of my lines is the most dangerous phrase in the English language is "it won't work here," and my sort of exposition on that is if you have anything to do with its implementation, you're right.
Yeah.
And the other is we've always done it this way. That's
yeah. I think that one of my favorite Henry Ford quotes is, "Whether you think you can or think you can't, you're right."
Exactly.
You can only do what you think you can do, and some people are willing to push the limits and see what they can do. Most people are comfortable right there, and this is another sad thing that I see based on the number of people I'm in contact with. Most people would rather fail doing what they've always done than to succeed if success requires change. Now, change doesn't come until you're forced into it, unless you're a little bit brighter than average.
Well, and yeah, I think so. That's a really good point to come back to, the comfort zone bit of human nature. And I've heard someone say that there is no pain in change, but there is a tremendous amount of pain associated with the resistance to change. And the since the 80s, we had the change. We had input costs rising and the product costs or price remaining relatively constant, or in constant dollars, maybe even going down. And
Right.
that was a signal for change that too many have resisted for too long. And it creates all this pain.
Yep.
But you talk about boxes, and we talked about the end box that goes to the grocery store, but we're not hopefully talking about that. This sort of philosophical or other kinds of boxes.
Well, I talk about the box that I put myself in. This is my worldview, and nobody put me there but me. I view the world based around the paradigm that I'm sitting in. And you could call it a comfort zone. I've been in this comfort zone for 50 years. I really don't want to step out and see what else is going on. And that's what most people think. I would say for some reason, I was built a little different. I mean, at a very young age, I started looking outside my box and challenging what anybody else was doing. And as you know, Peter, I challenge the status quo in everything. Whether it's in academics and business and religion or politics, the status quo has to be challenged. Otherwise, there's no progress. We remain the same, and you can't remain the same. The world moves on whether you're dragging your feet or not.
Mm-hmm. And I think it was Jim Garish who talked about a lot of people, they think they're breaking out of the box, but they leap from one box to another and now think, oh, okay, I've broken out of the box. Well, you're in a new box. And how much of that previous experience have you brought with you? Because not everything there needed to be discarded, hopefully. And so we don't progress necessarily by saying, "Oh, okay, look, I'm free of that old box, but here I am in this one."
Yeah, I think we have to, and it comes easy for me. I don't know why, but we have to constantly be looking outside the box. Am I missing something? And if you never look outside the box, you'll never know what you are missing or might be missing. But that's a good. I've probably heard Jim say something similar to that too. But as long as again, I think that's your comfort zone. I don't want to feel like I'm dangling out there uncontrollable. So I'm going to control things, and it's not a safe place to be because the world's going to change every day, every week. Something's changing, and we've got to be trying to keep up with it or ahead of it.
Yeah. And some of my heroes from the human health side of the Ruminati tribe are people who have had to do that in their profession, which, now you've got a whole nother layer of discomfort to add on top of that. And to hear a human being say, I was wrong, is so remarkable in a human being that we should just like applaud and encourage them, because I think that's model behavior. But like you say, we have too many knee-jerk reactions to attack that, and so I wanna I'll be leveraging your herd quitter to some of these other people that it's been my pleasure to know. So as I said before, we met now a decade ago almost. It wasn't in February that I was in Northeast Nebraska. I know that it was more like September, as I recall. And
we've met several times since then.
Yes, yes. So over the last decade, have you sensed some positive changes, or what's your perspective at this point?
I have. I've been asked to give speaking presentations since 1994. I mean, as soon as the world started hearing these crazy ideas, they started putting me on the stage, and boy, I got arrows shot at me, and I was the stupidest guy they'd ever seen, and that did not really go away until maybe 15 years ago. And gradually people are accepting what I'm saying, and even universities, which I've antagonized a lot of universities because they've been leading us in the wrong way. But there's a lot of university people know that the same thing I know, and there's a gradual change there. But as soon as the universities jump over and say, what he's saying makes sense, then more and more people are doing that. I called it last spring, prior to our bull sales, because we get to talk to a lot of people, and most of them that call us are status quo, doing things the way Dad always did. And I noticed that most of the people I was talking to were 45 and younger and ready to get off the old horse that's about to fall over dead and get on a new horse. And that was huge. We saw that through our spring sales. I would say that we've seen more change, or the desire to change, in the last year than we've seen in 10 years. Altogether, 10 years. It is coming, and some of it's coming because it has to happen, and some of it's coming because they finally get it, and they don't want to keep doing what they've been doing because that's not working. And you mentioned it earlier, when somebody says I was wrong, and that's the biggest thing that keeps us from changing. If I've been doing the same thing for 30 years, and all of a sudden I realize what I was doing for 30 years wasn't right, that's hard to change. It's almost easier to keep doing what I know is wrong than to say I was wrong. And that's but people can do that. You have to, in order to make any paradigm shift, you've got to admit that paradigm I was in wasn't working. Mm-hmm. But I've invested so much of my life doing what didn't work that I hate to change.
Well, and also, I mean, if it's a generational operation, even if they're not, if the parents or grandparents aren't involved anymore, it still feels like that you're judging them, and the point ought to be made is they were doing things appropriate for their time, and now you get to do things appropriate in your time. And the goal is the preservation of this enterprise, which, regardless of what Grandpa would have thought about how you're doing it, would have appreciated that you're doing
Right.
it. So like you say, what's your goal, and what are, just some metrics of progress rather than confusing metrics with goals, I guess would
Yeah.
be. Um,
And the most ranches and farms are family businesses. That's just the way it is. And so it's sad to see a family business go down. And Grandpa would never have wanted that. I mean, Grandpa would want you to be doing whatever it takes to keep it going the right direction. And I talk about in my weekly newsletters and or updates in my newsletters. I talk about the next generation. There are places where the next generation cannot wait to be involved because it's working. Whereas in most places, the next generation, they're really not excited about working so hard for nothing.
yeah, indeed. So you mentioned your newsletter. Can people who are not in agriculture but are interested in maybe hearing one of your presentations or reading what you put out in your newsletter,
Oh yeah.
how would people do that?
I send out weekly emails. I send out what I call a PCC update, which is about business and ranching. Sometimes I slip into politics and other stuff I shouldn't. I also send out a weekly devotion, and then we mail out quarterly newsletters. Now, I think newsletters go out to 20,000 people. The emails go out to around 15 or 16,000 people. And I would venture to say that a fourth to one third of those subscribers are not ranchers. I
Okay.
mean, they like what we're saying. They like to know what's going on in our industry. But if people want to sign up for any of that, they can go to our website, pharocattle.com. There's a sign up sheet there, and you can sign up for whatever you want to sign up for. And when you get tired of it, you just unsubscribe.
Perfect. And I'll put links in the show notes. So again, Kit, thank you for sharing time and your thoughts and information. It's only fair, since I've been asking you a bunch of questions, to offer you the opportunity to ask me any if you have any.
Yeah, you worked my brain pretty hard this afternoon. I think I'm just going to leave it right where it's at. But
Excellent.
I appreciate what you're doing, for people, for industries, for agriculture, and that's the more we can bring people to the right understanding, and more people succeed. That's possible. But it's not going to happen if nobody gets involved.
Indeed. I look forward to the next time we can actually be in the same space. I have had the pleasure of being at several of your bull sales and giving presentations in sales rings, which is entirely appropriate. Not always in sales rings, but sometimes.
Mostly.
Yeah. But let's wait until the temperature's a little above freezing. I think that would be better.
Yep, this won't last.
No, it won't. No, absolutely.
Yeah.
Kit, thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.